Hello and welcome to Devil's Advocate. Just how good is the 123 agreement India negotiated in Washington last week? That's the key issue I shall explore in the first of a two-part series with the National Security Advisor M K Narayanan. Mr. Narayanan, let me start with a simple question. How pleased are you with the work you did in Washington last week?
I think we are satisfied. The team that went to Washington is fairly satisfied with what we achieved. And I think when we came back and reported back to our leaders, I think they seemed pretty satisfied with what we did.
Let me put it like this. Is this merely a good deal or is it the best you could have got?
Well, there's always, I suppose, scope for improving it. But I think it is much better than what we anticipated that we could get. So I would presume that it's somewhere in between the best and good.
In August last year, the Prime Minister said in Parliament, we seek the removal of restrictions on all aspects of cooperation and technology transfer pertaining to civil nuclear energy. Is he now in a position to go back to Parliament in August and say, I succeeded?
I think he's in a position to go back to Parliament and say that what he had said about full civil nuclear cooperation is that commitment he can sustained as far as he is concerned. What we have got is an agreement between India and the United States for civil nuclear cooperation that involves nuclear reactors and various aspects of the nuclear fuel cycle. We have also got a commitment saying that this is an agreement between states with advanced nuclear technologies with the same benefits and advantages. I think in a comprehensive sense, this is an all-encompassing kind of a statement, which I think should make me sort of sustain all that we wish to have.
So let's take those points one by one.
No, I will just take on saying that to that extent, I think the agreement fulfills the commitments that the Prime Minister has made.
Let me just repeat that. So the agreement fulfills the Prime Minister's commitment to secure full civil nuclear cooperation.
Yes, I think so.
Let's go into some of the issues that you mentioned one by one, and let's start with, in fact, the right to reprocess. Has this been granted to India in a manner that India can accept?
The question that you are asking me is, do we have the right to reprocess? I think we have the right to reprocess spent fuel.
You have the right to reprocess spent fuel. The newspaper reports say that the 123 agreement gives India prior consent, although the specific arrangements will need to be worked out mutually between both sides within a finite time period of 18 months. If within that finite time period the two sides can't agree, then does prior consent mean India can go ahead and reprocess anyway?
No, it's not that there are any conditions to that. It is prior consent. It's upfront advance consent rights. What we have done, what we have offered the Americans is that the fuel that they would supply as also a fuel that we would get from other countries, we are willing to put it in a dedicated national facility so as to remove any concerns that they may have about the fuel going anywhere other than what they wish to see.
And that was an important assurance?
That was an important, I mean, I believe that it satisfied some of their, I don't think we had any problems about this, but I think it satisfies both parties.
And on that basis, you have got prior consent?
On that, well, I presume that's one of the major factors.
And prior consent is the important term?
Yes, prior consent is...
So there's no further negotiation needed?
No, as far as the consent rights are concerned, there's no negotiations at all.
Connected with this is the issue of fallback safeguards. In the event that the IAEA is unable, for whatever reason, to safeguard Indian facilities, what fallback procedure is agreed upon?
No, I mean, you are now forcing me to go into the text, but what I would like to mention is that we have taken that contingency into account, and if and when such a situation were to arise, the general belief is that this would happen only when Armageddon takes place, in which case what rights anybody has is a matter of speculation. But I think that if such an eventuality were to occur, I think both the supplier and the recipient would get together and decide what additional or what new verification procedures are necessary.
So again, this is left to be decided when and if the event occurs. It's not agreed upon now?
No, there is no problem. We have agreed that we will have only IAEA safeguards and no fallback.
And there's no question of American or any other national inspectors trampling over our territory?
What we are trying to be as true to our commitment that there will be safeguards in perpetuity.
Now,
if for some reason that breaks down, we are willing to look at what other verification measures we should think of.
another critical concern is India's right to carry out further nuclear tests if it deems that this is in its national interest to do. Is there anything, directly or indirectly, in the 123 agreement which would limit or restrict this right?
This entire 123 agreement, or the entire negotiations that we have had with the United States, has been with regard to civil nuclear cooperation. So the question of our rights to test just did not come into the discussion or the debate at all.
The newspaper reports say that in fact the 123 agreement specifically contains what's called a non-hindrance clause, which explicitly says that nothing in the 123 would impinge or in any way hinder India's strategic military nuclear program. Is that right?
You're compelling me to say, I do not know where the newspaper got, but I will not like to deny what the newspaper has said.
It's also said that the very word detonation nor the phrase nuclear test appears anywhere in the text of the 123. Again, is that right?
Once again, I would not like to deny what the newspaper has said.
Let's then ask you a blunt question. One of the concerns people have is that this 123 agreement is designed to in fact cap or roll back India's nuclear arsenal.
Yeah, I think that, or I would like to be very explicit on this. I think whoever is saying this, I think is either he's ignorant or he's jaundiced or he's prejudiced. I think there is nothing in the 123 agreement, as I said, which deals with our strategic program. We decided this issue way back in March 2006. We have separated our military or strategic facilities.
So the nuclear military arsenal remains inviolate and sacrosanct.
Total and absolute.
Another issue of concern is India's right to build up strategic reserves, what are considered lifetime supplies of fuel for its reactor. Is that assured by the 123?
Yes, the 123 got, you know, how did the issue of the strategic fuel reserve arise? When we agreed that we will put our safeguarded, put our nuclear reactors under safeguards. For those safeguarded reactors, we wanted an assurance that there will be uninterrupted fuel supply.
And that's been given?
And that it is a cut and paste which has been put back. The entire provision which is in the March 2, 2006 statement is there in black and white, and with the condition that there will be no derogation of these rights.
So specifically, concerns that had arisen in India that the Obama amendment would restrict or in some way undermine India's right to build up strategic reserves, those concerns are allayed.
I think both the Prime Minister and External Affairs Minister has said that the Hyde Act or other acts which the United States has done is they will have to adhere to their part of it. We will adhere to what we have got in the 123 agreement.
And you have got lifetime supplies assured?
I think as far as we have on the text, as in when you say, it will not give any room for any doubt on this point, I think.
Very specifically connected with this is in fact America's right of return in the event that the 123 agreement comes to be terminated. The real issue here is, have you been able to immunize India's strategic reserves, these lifetime supplies of fuel for India's reactors, from a right of return?
I think if you see the text, and if you don't look at it with any degree of prejudice, you would see that we've got, while the United States has its right of return sort of agreed to, I think we have a fairly comfortable position as far as immunization of strategic fuel.
This is so important a question, let me repeat it, Mr. Narayan. Are you saying, yes, you have immunized India's strategic reserves?
I would like, as I said, if you had asked me this question 2 weeks later, I might have been in a position to say it more explicitly because you would have seen the text and I would have been...
But you're comfortable?
I'm very comfortable.
And you believe that, in fact, the government is comfortable too?
I believe so, because we have reported to the government has seen the text.
It's reported in the press that, in fact, what the Americans have agreed to in the text is 2 or 3 things. One, they've agreed to help India build strategic reserves. Secondly, they've committed themselves to the continuous operation of Indian reactors. And thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, they've agreed that they will only take back fuel which has been supplied to India by America once India has had a chance to make alternate arrangements to replace it.
Obviously, you've seen the text somewhere, but we have got multi-layered assurances.
And you're not denying these?
I don't deny any of this, but the point is that during the period of the discussions, I think the understanding on both sides was that what was agreed to in March or earlier in March 2006 and earlier in July 2005 should find expression both in letter and in spirit, and by and large we've got that.
Very quickly, finally, what does the 123 agreement say with regard to India's right to acquire nuclear technologies or components connected with enrichment, reprocessing and heavy water?
I think it has not been denied, but we will require an amendment which will work towards that.
The important thing is it's not been denied.
Denied, yeah.
So you require a further amendment to the agreement, but it's not denied.
Not denied.
Are you confident that this won't become a precedent for the NSG countries and therefore an excuse for the NSG countries to prevaricate in giving India access to these technologies and components?
I mean, I don't think there's any NSG country which has a statute which prevents it. What the United States is sort of circumscribed by the fact that it has certain laws in this regard. Our entire negotiations, we proceeded on the basis that we will not ask the United States to either break or bend its laws beyond a point. But where it is a policy issue, we will push them to the limits.
But will the United States use its laws or its practices to prevent NSG?
No. I mean, the whole idea was to have a civil nuclear cooperation agreement, and the United States has committed to help us with the NSG.
So the United States is also committed to ensure that even if it cannot sell technologies and components, the NSG will be encouraged and not prevented from selling the same. You have a commitment to that effect?
No post-conditions. The United States will not be a party to any post-conditions by the NSG.
Let's take a break at that point, Mr. Narayan. Let's come back and talk about the next steps. We'll be back in a moment's time. See you after the break. Welcome back to Devil's Advocate and an exclusive interview with the National Security Advisor, M K Narayanan. Mr. Narayanan, now that India has a satisfactory 123 agreement, let's turn to the next steps. And to begin with, the need to secure India-specific safeguards with the IAEA. How easy or difficult will that be?
I'm told by the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission and the previous chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, who are doing the discussions with the IAEA on our behalf, that this should not be too difficult.
Are we talking about a matter of weeks, months, or could this cross a year?
Oh, no. Frankly, I don't know the answer, but from what I have understood from them, this certainly will not take a year. It should take maybe weeks, maybe a few months at the very best.
The next stage, of course, will be negotiations with the NSG countries to ensure that they gave India similar waivers as well. Now, countries like Austria, New Zealand, Sweden, Norway, possibly even Japan, have reservations. Are you worried that those could become stumbling blocks?
It could, but we are encouraged by the fact that a number of countries have already offered to help us with the NSG.
But none of these particular ones that are named?
No, I'm talking of countries like Russia, France, of course the United States, the UK. So we are hopeful that they would do much of the work, and our own efforts to lobby with these countries would be there.
It's sometimes suggested that these countries may insist upon specific conditions, or at least they may attach a list of expectations that they have of India. If either were to happen, how would you handle that irksome situation?
No, we are very clear that no post conditions, as are generally referred to, would be agreed to by us, unless it's something which is very minimal, because I think what we are offering is, what we are seeking is a clean exemption from the NSG.
If a clean exemption from the NSG is what you want, how important is American help in securing it?
Very considerable, very considerable.
And have you got an assurance from America that it will help?
I think we have an assurance from the United States.
When you say you think, is there an element of doubt, or simply are you being diplomatic?
No, I don't want to be speaking on behalf of the United States. I mean, when I say I think, if I didn't think so, I wouldn't say so.
So you're comfortable that the Americans will step in and ensure the NSG falls in line, so to speak?
Let me make one point here. I think in the entire sort of range of discussions that we had at different levels of the system, I found that the US attitude to civil nuclear cooperation and whatever India needs outside the United States was extremely positive. So therefore, while I can't speak for the United States or for members of the United States government, that's why I use the word I think they are inclined to go as far as they possibly can in helping us.
After you've crossed the IAE hurdle, so to speak, and the NSG hurdle, the 123 agreement has to go back to Congress for an up-down vote. How confident are you that an agreement that comprehensively meets India's concerns, not just adequately, but comprehensively, will be passed by a Congress that's dominated by Democrats?
I think the Democrats have always been favorable towards
Except that
India.
Ed Markey and about 22 others have just written letters to President Bush suggesting that this is a capitulation, warning him that if he's breached the Hyde Act or other American laws, he could jeopardize the 1, 2, 3. Are you worried by that?
No, but as far as I can see, we have not breached the Hyde Act anywhere in that sense.
But if they think Bush has breached the Hyde Act by making concessions to India, they may vote down your deal.
No, as I said, we have seen to it that to the extent possible that there's no law has been broken. Now, if somebody wishes to interpret it differently, it's a different matter. But let me tell you, the sense I get when I was in Washington for 5 days was that nobody wants to do something which would detract from a benefit to India.
And you got this from Democrats as well?
Well, across the board, let me say. I don't want to make from Democrats, etc. But I think we have a sense that, by and large, but I can't speak. Congressmen are sovereign in their own rights, or senators are sovereign in their own rights. So I don't wish to say that. But the general feeling is that the U.S. Congress would like an agreement which is beneficial to India to go through.
So you're confident that regardless of what's appearing in the press, regardless of letters that individual congressmen may write or speculation in newspapers, this deal will find approval from the US Congress?
Rather than use the word confident, that's very hopeful.
Very hopeful. But again, you're not changing the terminology because of doubt, you're simply again being discreet. In which case, how conscious are you of the fact that President Bush and his administration have done for India something that perhaps no other government in the world and perhaps no other government in America would have been prepared to do? They've changed their laws, and they're now going to change international laws for the benefit of one country alone.
I think it's quite extraordinary, and I think it has much to do with the personal chemistry between the president, US president, and the Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. I think this has been driven by, I think, the personal equations, the personal chemistry, the personal relationship between the two countries, because I find this has been really a top-down effort. And if finally the US Congress votes in favor of the 1, 2, 3, I think it will be quite an extraordinary achievement.
And you're saying that actually at the end of the day, two men, George Bush and Manmohan Singh, pulled it off because they hit it off with each other.
Yeah, I would like to say that.
And they learned to trust each other and to give each other the benefit of trust.
Benefit of trust. And I think that the tremendous credibility that the Prime Minister Manmohan Singh exuded in whatever he said.
Would you give any credit to Atal Bihari Vajpayee and the fact that the process started with him?
Most certainly. I mean, I think the process would never have taken off but for the Prime Minister Vajpayee and the team. And I think yesterday in the meeting between the Prime Minister and Mr. Vajpayee and others, he started off the discussion on this point.
Very quickly then, virtually my last question. Once the deal goes through and Congress has approved it, what impact will it have on the wider Indo-US relationship?
I think it would transform the India-US relationship to an entirely different plane. It then depends on what either side wants to make of the relationship.
But the opportunity for transformation is there.
Not only opportunity, I think the transformation would have taken place. To what extent you want to use it will depend, of course, on the...
The two countries like to call themselves strategic partners hereafter. Might they start considering themselves allies?
We have generally tried to avoid the word allies because we have always tried to follow an independent path. But I think where their strategic interests converge, I suppose we would associate with them.
Interests will converge increasingly after this.
May or may not. I presume they would.
Mr. Narayanan, let's end this particular interview there. Tomorrow I want to talk to you about how you view the changing situation in Pakistan and how you respond to increasing concerns that Indian Muslims are involved in terror in the West. That's tomorrow on CNBC at 10:30. But for today, goodbye, good night.